Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration, continuing with Daily Spawn. Today, we're up to issue number 31. For those who maybe are jumping on and don't realize or haven't been with us for a while, yeah, Rocky's got some family stuff he's taking care of right now. So I'm flying solo on this for now, but he should be back really, really soon. So let's go ahead and dive into issue 31, which features the return of the Redeemer, or should I say anti-Spawn, but he goes by a new name now, the Redeemer, which is the current name if you're reading the current Spawn universe stuff, or like Scorched or what have you, or if you've been a fan of Spawn for a while. Yeah, I guess they figured that Redeemer was a better name. Maybe it kind of distanced him from Spawn just a little bit. So written by Todd McFarlane, art by Greg Capullo and Todd McFarlane, Tom Orzechowski on letters, and Steve Oliff handling the colors. So it starts off, Spawn's sitting in the dark, kind of brooding. We're not exactly sure where he is. He's thinking about his last encounter with Wanda. You know, it seems like whenever he has downtime, his thoughts definitely turn to his ex-wife, which is not unsurprising considering the sacrifice that he made to return for her. And he's thinking about how scared she was and how she feared him and rejected him, and he's just not sure what to do. And he's also thinking about the costume, right? Like he just recently, and we didn't cover it because it was an Angela miniseries, but we probably will at some point. But his costume was really damaged. We saw the last couple issues. He's down in the American Southwest, or South rather, Alabama and whatnot. And you know, his costume, especially the cape, is just not what it used to be. So on the next page, we see that he actually hitched a ride on a train, because we know he was walking for quite a while. Obviously, it's going to take a long time to walk from South United States all the way to New York, but he was able to jump on a train, hitch a ride with a bunch of other, how does McFarlane put it, a sea of homeless humanity. So as the train stops, tons of guys getting off, which seemed a little far-fetched to me. I mean, yeah, there are hobos, or whatever you want to call them, guys that ride the rails. Not as common anymore these days. Was more common back in the 90s when this came out, but even then, I mean, it's like practically a passenger train. But anyway, it's a little nitpick. But as Spawn returns, another thing that kind of dates this issue, as Spawn returns to New York, he's looking up at the skyline of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, which, you know, obviously we all know what happened in 2001. So it's interesting, though, because we're told by McFarlane this city that Spawn once hated, or Al Simmons once hated, is now his haven. It now feels like home. And so he immediately heads for his alleys, right, his area. And the fact that he thinks of that as home and feels like that's what he missed, that's what he's homesick for, it's very, very interesting. He has found a place where he belongs, even if these, you know, friends of his, these other homeless, aren't, you know, exactly in a position to help him out in his war against heaven, or his fight against Mount Bolgia. They're loyal, they do care about him, and sure enough, when he gets back to the alley where his throne is that they built for him, there's Bobby and Bootsy. Bobby, probably the one that's closest to him, the one that Spawn's confided in the most, and the one that Spawn used some of his power to raise from the dead. They're both there. They're talking about Al and how they miss him, and it's sort of a heartfelt scene, and it gives some good context as Spawn sneaks around and scares them, and they're actually really happy to see him, which is it's kind of touching in a way, you know. Yes, Spawn has protected them and protected the alleys against various dangers, but part of the reason the dangers exist is because of Spawn. And Bobby even kind of mentions that a little bit in a second here. But either way, Spawn is back where he belongs, in the alley, but you do notice that his cape is still, it hasn't healed. It's not back to its normal appearance. So meanwhile, not far away, we see the building that's the headquarters of Heaven on Earth, as it were. When last we saw, Gabrielle was in charge, but now apparently because of things that happened in the Angela miniseries, she's been relieved of her duty, and now Raphael, a new angel, has been put in charge, and she's asking for a status update. She's getting the status update from the orbital station, and she wants to know what's going on. And first of all, have they chosen another subject? They tell her that they have, and then she asks what's the status on the scanning, and they say there's actually three. There's three spawns or three signals, although two of them are very weak. So not sure why that is at this point. So when she hears that, she says, okay, what are you talking about? Are we talking about a partial spawn, a new spawn? And they're like, well, we're not sure. We haven't seen this sort of thing before, but they are all within a very small radius in New York. And when Raphael hears that, she's like, wait, right in my backyard? Okay, are you ready to deploy, the new soldier? And they say, yeah, sure. We've picked somebody who we think will be able to tolerate the elemental fire better. That they will embrace it. They won't fight against it. They say we've decommissioned the first soldier, which we know to have been Jason Wynn. And so we see the Redeemer or anti-spawn costume there, and they're about to basically bond a new person with that, and we'll see that in a second. But we do get a quick interlude here with Terry Fitzgerald. Some great art on this page. The facial expression of Terry from Greg, I think, is top notch. And he's trying to, again, he's trying to track down why Jason Wynn was trying to frame him. But all the files that he needs to get access to, every time he tries, no matter what route he tries, it's access denied, which is kind of interesting, and I know computer systems were different back then and people didn't necessarily have knowledge of them. But I mean, if a file is like encrypted and locked down, like he's trying all these different ways to get to it. There's really only one way to get to a file on a system, unless the information is stored in numerous places, more than one place. But anyway, again, early times in the world of computers, relatively. So he thinks there's only one option left to him. Because he doesn't have the necessary security clearance, what he needs to do is he needs to be transferred into Jason Wynn's department, which is, kind of like going into the lion's den, if you will. So meanwhile, back in the alley, Bobby's talking to Spawn, and he's talking to him about what I mentioned earlier about how things have been quiet and in his mind kind of boring now that Spawn's been gone. That's both good and bad. And Spawn's like, well, what do you mean? He says, well, a lot of the guys, they were they're a little paranoid, and they're glad that things are quiet, and they're blaming the excitement that we've had and the troubles that we've had on the fact that you're here. But there's a lot of other guys like me and Bootsy and whatnot that, like, you've protected us. Bobby's like, you gave me my life back. Of course, I'm never going to turn my back on you. I'm always going to be your guy, but I do wish you hadn't left without saying anything. And Spawn's like, well, I didn't have a choice. Like, I got dragged off by a bunch of angels into this fight between heaven and hell. And after that, after this fight in heaven, they just dumped me in the south, and I didn't want to use up any of my limited power to get back here. So I've been walking. But you got to understand that it's not just me that's causing all this havoc. Like, there's a lot of people whose lives are out of control. Even the angels that I recently encountered, even they're not in control of their own lives. Not children. And he's thinking back to the kids who are being abused by their father. And he's thinking back to the Ku Klux Klan and the blacks that they were harassing and whatnot. So kind of a little bit of exposition going back to the previous few issues. Although it does seem like in this issue, in the last couple issues, McFarlane hasn't given us a recap of the entire series or the origin of Spawn. It's been a while. And so it does seem like he's getting better at being less expositional. But anyway, as the conversation continues, Bootsy's asking him, what's the deal with your cape, right? It doesn't seem very impressive anymore. It really, it used to really be something. It used to be big and billowing, and it doesn't, like, it looks like there's something wrong with it, basically. And Spawn's like, yeah, I'm not really sure why it hasn't recovered. I feel like I've recovered, but for whatever reason, the cape hasn't. And then he asks about his warning sign that he had left. You know, he had left the curse, as he calls him, um, basically pinned up on the wall. And he's not there anymore. And the guy's like, yeah, we're not really sure what happened, but he must have been in a hurry because he didn't even like take all of his parts with him. So I think that's kind of funny that he puts it that way. So anyway, not sure what's going on with Spawnscape. We did notice it in the last couple of issues that it didn't look like it was its normal self. But as we turn the page, we're checking out a soup kitchen. We learn about this guy, Phil Temper, who is a social worker. He's won awards for his work with the homeless. We find out that in his early life, in his juvenile life, he was in and out of juvenile detention facilities. And once when he was in there, he found the Lord, as it were, and became a very strong man of faith. And that led him down the path of becoming a social worker and completely turning his life around. And like I said, he's won awards for his determination to help the homeless. And he's very devout. And as it turns out, that faith is what is going to allow him to accept that elemental fire, apparently, much more so than Jason Wynn did. So I like this choice of Phil Temper, even though I feel bad for the guy, but I like this choice of Phil Temper more than Jason Wynn in a lot of ways, because it makes so much more sense. Jason Wynn doesn't even believe in God, so for him it was all about, okay, he was supposedly physically fit, and maybe somebody they felt was mentally malleable in a lot of ways. This guy's got faith. This guy's got belief. So it makes a lot more sense to me that he would be chosen. So disappears in a flash of lightning. They take him up to the orbital station, and we see these angels or whatnot infusing him with the power. Then we get the familiar three talking heads that we've seen throughout the series. The lady from CNN giving her version of this guy disappearing. Same thing with the guy from entertainment television, talking about this Good Samaritan who's won awards before for his work with the homeless. And then we've got the right-wing guy now on KRDF 68 Viewers Forum, and he's talking about how this, the world is crazy, bam, out of left field. Another New Yorker just disappears in the middle of a soup kitchen, and nobody can give him any answers. And the NYPD will give it about the same attention as the stolen car radio in Times Square, because the politicians don't really care about the little guy. He said, God bless us, everyone, basically. So meanwhile, at the NYPD gym, we see Sam and Twitch talking about what to do about Chief Banks. And Sam's like, well, I sort of already sent a message. And sure enough, in Chief Banks' office, we see that he's received an anonymous note that basically lets him know that somebody knows what he did in regards to Billy Kincaid. Somebody knows that he worked with Jason Wynn to kidnap the child of the senator that they wanted to put pressure on. So as soon as he sees the note, he calls somebody and he says, "This is Banks. Get me Jason Wynn now." So, as soon as he's threatened, he's going to the guy he thinks has the power to help save him or protect him from whoever is threatening to reveal the secret. So meanwhile, back in the alley, Spawn is feeling more at home. He's kind of looking over his people, I guess you'd say. His children is how he thinks of them. And again, just sort of reacclimating himself to being back to the place that he considers home. And then he feels this, how do they put it? He feels a spark. The chains from his costume start pulling him toward an unknown destination. It's about 3 blocks away. So he goes sprinting in that direction, and it's a familiar sensation that he feels. And as he rounds the corner, there he sees Anti-Spawn, and Anti-Spawn has captured Bobby, and he's asking about the signal. He's like, "Well, why do you have this signal? It's very weak, but it's clear there's been a necroplasm transferal from the Hellspawn. And Bobby's like, what are you talking about? I'm not Spawn. And Anti-Spawn's like, well, yes, I know that, but you have some of his power. Not enough to be a threat, but this is something we need to investigate. And he calls up to the station to be teleported up there. And again, they refer to Anti-Spawn as Redeemer. So when Spawn sees this, obviously he does not want to lose Bobby again, and so he jumps out of the shadows, says, leave Bobby alone. This is between you and me, Anti-Spawn. And when he calls him Anti-Spawn, he says, no, my name is Redeemer. So again, we're clearly, it's been rebranded. This character's been rebranded. McFarlane must have liked the name Redeemer better. But unfortunately, Spawn is, even though it's been weeks, he's still not fully recovered. He's still in a weakened state, and he doesn't have the costume at full health either, as it were. So we know that it was almost an even fight between Spawn and what was Anti-Spawn and is now called Redeemer the first time around. We know that this version, this second soldier, this Phil Temper in his Redeemer state is even more powerful, like more able to embrace the elemental fire, right? That's what we've been told. So he's more than a match for Spawn, and it takes him out pretty quickly, actually. So Spawn thinks, well, I have one chance to save Bobby, and he basically goes frontal assault on the Redeemer, and the Redeemer blows a giant hole in Spawn's chest, and Spawn's kind of laying there. So all the other homeless guys have heard the commotion, and they come running, and they're commenting on the giant hole in Spawn's chest. So here's what's interesting, though. He says, that the hole is not new, right? It's okay. He's like, Curse blew this hole in me a while back, and I didn't want to waste any power fixing it, so the costume just like closed up over it. So that's interesting, right? And we know that, and we've speculated that Spawn hasn't wanted to heal his face because he still has the shoelace stitching it together. And now we find out he's not even replacing the giant hole in his chest. Like that's just weird in a lot of ways. But I get it, right? Like he's trying to hang on to every little point of energy that he has. But man, he's getting his butt kicked a lot. He definitely seems weaker than he's been in the past. So as he's laying there, all of a sudden, what's left of the cape starts lashing out at the homeless guys, and Spawn tells everybody to run. He's like, "Oh my God, the cape is out of control. It's still in shock. It hasn't been able to heal, and it can't even tell friend from foe right now. So it's lashing around like a wild animal facing death," is the way McFarlane puts it. A wild animal that's been sort of backed into a corner, as it were. So we see a little while later, Spawn is recovering. There's some signs of life. We get a little graphic of how much power he has left. 6971. I think the last time we saw it, it was 7012. But it looks like the cape is starting to heal in some way. And sure enough, it begins to move. It begins to grow. It's not just the little tendrils anymore. And when we get a look at the last page, even though most of Spawn is in shadow, it says the costume lives again, and it says next issue, a new look. So even when we do see the parts of the cape that aren't in shadow, it's still, it doesn't look like it looked before, and that's part of probably what they're saying with a new look. It still has holes in it and whatnot. So it's almost like this living entity that is this symbiotic costume has managed to regenerate itself, but it's not the same as it was previously. It's done something. There's some reason it was able to regenerate some of itself, but not all of itself. Maybe think of it as it's been scarred now, and it can't. It's gotten enough energy. Maybe that's why the energy counter changed from 7012 to the, what was it, 6971, because Spawn's allowed the costume to use a little bit of his energy to heal itself, but not enough to fully heal itself. Or as I said, maybe it's just scarred from all the damage that it's been experiencing recently. So how Spawn's going to rescue Bobby? How's he going to save him from the orbital station? Is there going to be friction between Spawn and some of the other homeless? Because Bobby was really Spawn's champion, like we've talked about, in terms of telling the other homeless guys how much Al has helped them and how much he's their friend. And he talked about, hey, you've saved me before. You always have my back. I would never desert you. But now Bobby's gone, so Spawn doesn't have that advocate among the homeless. Plus, there at the end, after the battle with Redeemer, Spawn's costume was actually attacking the homeless guys, right? So that can't make them happy, and we wonder, hey, how's that going to play out? The other aspects of it, what's going to happen with Chief Banks and reaching out to Jason Wynn, which to me, like, I get why you do that, but at the same time, if I'm Chief Banks, I mean, I hope Chief Banks has something on Jason Wynn, right? Because, I mean, if you're Jason Wynn, we've seen how unscrupulous he is. If you're Jason Wynn and Banks calls you up and says, hey, somebody's got some evidence linking me to being involved with this kidnapping and killing of the senator's kid, if I'm Wynn, I'm going to just have Chief Banks taken out, right? I don't want there to be any link. Like, blame it on Chief Banks. Make it look like a suicide or whatever. Hey, Banks was a cop. He did this terrible thing. He killed himself out of guilt or not wanting to be prosecuted or whatever. But if you're Chief Banks, I feel like if you reach out to Jason Wynn, you're putting yourself in danger by letting Jason Wynn know that you're a weak link, right? That you're a threat to possibly lead back to him. So I don't know. We'll see how that all plays out. And obviously Terry Fitzgerald going into the Lion's Den, as I said, working for Wynn. So Wynn continues to be a pretty big part of the story, even if he is a lot in the background in the last couple issues. Haven't seen much of the mob or the mafia aspect. And then obviously the FBI CIA angle is completely flipped on its head with Terry Fitzgerald now kind of having the agency to sort of investigate and find out what's going on. Nothing about Spawn's identity being Al Simmons, and Terry and Wanda trying to discover that in this issue. So shifting a little bit back further toward the heaven versus hell narrative, the impending war between the two, which is what the return of a Hellspawn on Earth sort of signals, as we've been told before. So good issue. Art was fantastic. There's a couple of pages there where I just loved, and not even necessarily big action pages, right? Like that page where it's just Terry Fitzgerald working on the computer, like the expression on his face, like you can sense the anger and the frustration. It's so plain in the way that McFarlane and Capullo rendered Terry Fitzgerald's facial expression. So just fantastic. Really, really great art, great colors. I'm glad that we've seen the return of Anti-Spawn or Redeemer. And I do think I like the name Redeemer more than Anti-Spawn. It's just, it feels more biblical, right? Because Spawn, short for Hellspawn. Anti-Hellspawn doesn't feel like that's a name that heaven would use, but Redeemer does work a lot better. So we'll see how long the second wielder of the elemental fire lasts. This Phil Temper, will he be able to handle it? Will he burn out? Will he have any episodes where he has any sort of memory or recalls who he was for his previous life? Like, all that's still very much up in the air, because really what it seems like is when these Redeemers show up, it's basically a point and shoot weapon for the powers of heaven on earth, from that orbital platform. Just find what they want, send it out on the mission. And that leads me to my final question, which they said there were three signals, right? One normal signal, two very weak ones. The normal one obviously being Al Simmons. Second one makes sense that it was Bobby, because Al, shot him up with his energy to resurrect him. But what's the third, right? I can't remember Spawn having shared his power with anyone else. So what's this third signal, this other really weak signal? That's a question that still needs to be answered as well. So maybe we'll find that out next issue. So anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. We really appreciate you joining us. You guys really seem to be enjoying the daily spawns. Apologize that I'm not getting them out as early as I would like. Normally I like to drop them at 6 a.m. Eastern time, trying to get caught up. The stuff with Rocky's family really threw us for a loop. So really hoping by Friday of this week I can drop Friday's episode on time at 6 a.m. The Wednesday one's coming out super late. The Thursday one I'm hoping to put out midday Thursday, and then hopefully Friday I can drop it at the regular time. The other thing that's been taking up a lot of my time is I've been doing a lot of interviews. So it's a really good problem to have, to be as busy as I am with the podcast. So we've had some fantastic interviews and more to come. So we're hoping to do a lot more interviews because you guys seem to really enjoy those as well. But it is putting a little kink in the system here, especially with me having to run everything solo. So appreciate everybody's understanding and appreciate you guys enjoying the daily spawn. Not giving up on it yet, not missing any days yet, but hopefully I can get a little bit ahead this weekend, and we'll see how that all plays out. And obviously, really hoping Rocky gets back to join us soon. So anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. We really appreciate you guys joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.